The war on women we are discussing today really amounts to a debate over the definition of womanhood set forth 50 years ago in the book that Alan mentioned, the one by Betty Friedan called The Feminine Mystique. Namely, that a woman cannot be content to be defined primarily as a wife or a mother, but instead must find fulfillment through the pursuit of higher education, the advancement of a career outside the home, and the liberation of her body from nature's calling to bear children. But it also is a debate, as some of the speakers before me have noted, about whether women can, if they wish, truly have it all, both a career and a family. And if these notions fail to stir up enough controversy on their own, there is more. What about men? Can they have it all? In the final analysis, the war on women cannot be separated from another war, a war on men. Indeed, a war against the optimal relations between men and women and their children and the societies that they form. 3 decades after Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique, men's rights advocate Andrew Kimbrell published The Masculine Mystique, The Politics of Masculinity, 1995. He began by outlining a hidden crisis concerning the grim condition of the American male. Society brands men as self-interested, efficient, power-seeking, promiscuous, competitive, insensitive, and manipulative. This masculine mystique refuses to acknowledge traditional masculine traits such as generativity, stewardship, teaching, husbandry, and honor. Lacking affirmation and guidance, concluded Kimbrell, men are failing, women are healthier, women live longer, men are more prone to workplace injuries, to violent crime, and to suicide. Most significantly, Kimbrell detected that men are increasingly torn between the necessities of their job and the desire to have time for their families. Yes, men too suffer from a problem that has no name. The problem that has no name. That was the title of Friedan's opening chapter. There, Friedan verbalized what countless housewives thought and felt but did not know how to say. The American dream was a disappointment for women. Marriage, children, a house in the suburbs, full of modern conveniences, all of the trappings of success failed to satisfy the deeply human yearnings of women, at least for the middle-class, college-educated women whom Friedan interviewed. And so she promised women that they could have it all, a career if only society would let them, and a family if they wanted. But men are discovering this dream to be just as ephemeral for them as it has been for women. Why? Why so out of reach? Perhaps because it is just as unnatural for men to pursue a career apart from their families as for women. As Kimbrell explained, the separation of men and men's work from the family may well be the most significant personal and social disruption men have ever had to face. For generations, industrial society has been conducting an unparalleled anthropological experiment. What is the effect of virtual father absence on the family, children, and the redefinition of men's role in society? Culturally pervasive images of manhood reduce half of the human species to, at best, productive, emotionless, competitive machines, or at worst, promiscuous animals. Either way, precious few men model the virtues of generative, caring fathers to their own children, much less to the broader society. Kimbrell's analysis closely tracked that of Alexander Mitscherlich's Society Without the Father, which first had been published in 1963, the very year of The Feminine Mystique, originally entitled Auf dem Weg zur vaterlosen Gesellschaft, literally on the way toward a fatherless community. The 1991 English printing of Mitscherlich's opus expressed in its translated title the completion of a transition envisioned a generation earlier, Society Without the Father. By the 1990s, American, to say nothing of German society, had become fatherless in 2 important respects. First, as Mitscherlich had warned in 1963, the working, teaching father had gone extinct, replaced by a father who still works, but now out of his children's sight. And therefore he cannot teach because he is not present to model for them how work is done. Children of the industrial era have been raised typically by invisible fathers, by which Mitscherlich meant The disappearance of the father image so closely associated with the roots of our civilization and of the paternal instructive function. The imago of a working father is disappearing and becoming unknown. He made clear that he did not here mean only the occasional physical loss from divorce or death, but more profoundly, he had in mind the near universal social displacement of the psychological father, the father who nurtures his sons in the discipline of meaningful labor. Mitscherlich ascribed the cause of this displacement chiefly to industrialization. He next posited fatherlessness of the second degree, the disappearance of tangible, personal relationships from authority structures beyond the family. Children raised in the absence of a teaching father become absorbed into a mass sibling society in which an anonymous bureaucracy, not an authoritative individual, governs. The absence of identifiable leadership fosters a conformity that cannot easily be challenged, because one is not sure who is responsible for directing its course. Not only was Mitscherlich's work insightful, it also was predictive. America has become that second-order fatherless society of neutered siblings, seeking their own individual shares of an egalitarian utopia. By the century's end, the generation of men who had never observed their fathers working, but at best had only seen them go away to work, had themselves become fathers of sons, about to enter an uncharted territory. It's a place called Guyland. Sociologist Michael Kimmel explains that Guyland is a kind of suspended animation between boyhood and manhood, broader and deeper and more perplexing to its inhabitants than the adolescence introduced a century earlier by psychologist G. Stanley Hall. As Kimmel described, Guyland is the world in which young men live, unhassled by the demands of parents, girlfriends, jobs, kids, and other nuisances of adult life. In this topsy-turvy Peter Pan mindset, young men shirk the responsibilities of adulthood and remain fixated on the trappings of boyhood, while the boys they still are struggle heroically to prove that they are real men, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Guyland is the millennial generation's sibling society, a subculture of conformity in which young people try to become individuals, but they lack appropriate models for male maturity. Oddly, Kimmel denies that Guyland is a case of prolonged adolescence, and yet surely the aimless drift of today's video game playing college sophomores was unknown to pre-industrial societies in which boys became men by observing their fathers and their uncles who mentored them in the discipline of labor. But let us leave Guyland behind. Let's return to the insights on womanhood and manhood provided by Friedan and Mitscherlich. Both of these authors emphasize the importance of education. But beyond that facile comparison, they shared little agreement. Friedan envisioned intensive intellectual shock therapy programs, her term, to prepare housewives to compete successfully against men in the job market. Bowing before the altar of the college diploma, she professed, "Education and only education has saved and can continue to save American women from the greater dangers of the feminine mystique." Mitscherlich, by contrast, offered a child-centered view of the social order, in which the training of children by their parents should receive high priority. He saw this task as essential for the survival of the specifically human way of life. For Mitscherlich, education was not a utilitarian device for delivering knowledge or skills to the future employees. It was a formative experience, a lifestyle for shaping a child's character by developing relationships of trust within the family and, by extension, the community. 50 years after Mitscherlich's Society Without the Father and Friedan's Feminine Mystique, America has a more pressing need than improving career opportunities or expanding education for women. Already, women outnumber men in both college enrollment and college graduation rates at the bachelor's, master's, and in recent years, the doctoral levels. While men still may outnumber women as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, the Washington Post reported this morning it's a 96 versus 4% ratio. The lived experiences of many employees is that women not only work alongside men, but often serve as their supervisor. The equality debate has run its course, but still something of fundamental value is missing. Our nation needs now a revival of domesticity among women, among men, and among their children. Public policies that encourage homeschooling, home entrepreneurship, family flex time in the workplace, a shorter work week. These may prove more helpful than the focus on gender equality for the labor market. To require employers to treat all workers identically simply reinforces the career mystique's distorted view that a worker is a worker and nothing else. The career mystique? Well, that holds that adult life cannot be fulfilling apart from a continuous paid employment away from home in a field that one selects and enjoys. As in the mid-20th century, so also today, long hours of hard work for paid employment away from one's family somehow are expected to deliver the American dream, whether that dream be a house full of children in the suburbs or, as Friedan emphasized, the self-actualization of one's individual identity. As a program of deferred gratification, the career mystique also guarantees a lifetime of income security, stretching into retirement, in exchange for the decades of labor during one's prime. But this mystique seldom has delivered its promises. Unfortunately, the typical male careers of the mid-20th century provided poor models for women to follow. Post-war careers, as codified by Social Security, healthcare, and retirement regulations, essentially required a 40-hour or more work week to be consistently maintained for 4 consecutive decades or longer of one's life. Because this schedule left precious little wiggle room for family caregiving by the working spouse, career and family success required a division of labor between the breadwinner and the homemaker. The career mystique and the feminine mystique were, therefore, not alternatives, as Friedan suggested, but rather two sides of the same coin. Nevertheless, many women and a growing number of men attempted during the late 20th century to maximize their potentials simultaneously as a spouse, a parent, and an employee, only to discover that real wages were declining, as was the quality of their family relationships. Moreover, the declining earning power of men eroded their identities as family providers, while women expanded into the role of co-breadwinner. Wives and mothers of the past generation left their homes for careers or never established those homes in the first place, rather than working with their husbands to bring productive labor back into the home. Women thought it would be easier to put childbearing on hold, only to discover too late that fertility is easier to shut off than to turn back on. Children, instead of spending plenty of time with mom and not enough with dad, soon found themselves spending hardly any time with either parent, while being whisked from daycare to school to after-school care to sports practice, to a future for which no one had ever modeled for them the commitment, the cooperation, or the constructive power of familial interdependence. Mitscherlich reminds us that what once was true of work also was true of education. Character formation passed from parent to child through shared, meaningful activities. A revival of the working, teaching parents can rescue both masculinity and femininity from the mystiques of impoverished definitions that limit human flourishing. If Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer has correctly concluded that employees work more productively and creatively when meeting face-to-face, then shouldn't our nation also be asking how to maximize face-to-face opportunities for spouses and parents and their children, in order that our homes too may again become wellsprings of prosperity?